Welcome to Saddleback's Video Series. Be sure to follow Saddleback across all its social media platforms. Saddleback is your #1 resource for your reluctant and striving learners. And I'm Holly Sawyer, an English language development teacher out of Chesapeake, Virginia. When we think about cultural responsiveness as an EL teacher, I think, this is what I do every day. I engage in culture because I engage with my students who come from a variety of cultures. However, when we think about culture and we think about responsiveness, yes, we respond to culture, but are we truly responding to the culture, or are we responding to the student, the individual? When we are responding to the culture, we're responding truly to the person, to the individual. And for our students, that will include their prior experiences, their families, their beliefs, their values, their interests, their languages, their stories. I begin the school year with an identity unit. This is partly to just simply get to know my students, but also to give them that space aforementioned where they can share who they are. I will include mentor texts, individuals with similar backgrounds. For example, I've often gone to Sandra Cisneros' house on Mango Street, and there's 2 chapters in particular that I love. One is My Name, and the other chapter is the same chapter of the same name, The House on Mango Street. And that one in particular is quite great because she goes into, I did not always live on Mango Street. Before that, I lived wherever I lived. Before that, I lived this other place. Before that, I lived this other place. And so it sort of begins with where the person is now, where the student is now, and it slowly tracks back as to their origin. And often I love that because especially at the beginning of the school year, that's where we are. I see my students where they are now, and then this chapter, it gives my students the space to work them, express who they are at this moment, but then track backwards to their origins. Another great favorite of mine is the poem Identity by Julio Noboa Polanco. And this is a poem that he's written where he's expressing himself as a teenager, because he was a teenager when he wrote this, saying that he would rather be a weed as opposed to a flower, a rose cultivated, right? And so it gives my students this opportunity and this mindset of, what kind of person am I? Who do I want to be? And who would I rather be? So it gives them the language of rather, I would prefer, and it allows them the space and the time and the language to explore that concept. I've also taught Inside Out and Back Again by Tana Lai, who is a Vietnamese author. In particular, I love the chapter Kim Ha, which is about her protagonist, this girl who is exploring the origins of her name and how her brothers tease her mercilessly about her name. And so it really digs into those family dynamics and her expression of who she is in attachment with her culture, but also her family. So in terms of project-based learning throughout the year, we've already established in the very beginning of the year this expression of their identity in many different facets, their languages, their cultures, who they are as individuals, and are as a class getting to know each other as individuals and responding to one another. So when I move forward into the rest of the school year, cultural responsiveness, it can look like any of these expressions. When we've engaged in projects, usually there is some sort of a spin at the end where the students can remake, reform, and create their own version or own activity based off of what we've learned. So, for example, if we are doing a plant activity, right, the students can select which plant they're going to diagram and compare themselves to. And that plant, hey, it can be a plant from their home country where it often is, or it can be one of their selection, one of their interests, one of their the new plants that they're engaging in their new environment. For a study on musical genres, it may begin with the history of rock and roll and the history of rap and America's cultural and historical roots from which it emerged. And then my students have the opportunity to do their own research on a musical genre of their choice. And often you might see it as corridos or banda or bachata, right? But also you may be surprised at what interests them at the moment. And I've had, for example, one of my students from El Salvador, she chose K-pop because that is where her current interest lies. So it's responsive to her and her growth and her individuality and her culture to allow her the space to choose what musical genre interests her at the time. Another example of embedding cultural responsiveness in our curriculum, it can include talking, getting to know the students, allowing them to make some connections to their own experiences, and simply being curious. So at the moment, we're doing a social studies unit of study, and we're exploring some of the origins of the American Revolution. And we're talking about the word revolution and how it means change in government. And we're tying back to the revolutions that were experienced in their own countries, in their home countries. I was asking my students, oh, well, tell me about how was it taught? How did you learn about the revolution and the separation of Guatemala from Spain? And they immediately began to tell me the date, the year, and the connection, how for a short time that the Guatemala was connected with Mexico, and then it separated out and became a part of a federation of Central American states. So taking whatever it is that we're learning at the moment and talking to our students, asking them about what connections, what prior experiences, what prior educational experiences they've had, learning similar topics, that is responsiveness. As we're moving towards more culturally responsive teaching, I'd also like to take a second to share how I messed up early in my career as a EL teacher. We were reading a to Z booklet on the Statue of Liberty. And as an extension, as a project of that, I was having my students create in Canva an infographic. And my intent was for us to all revisit the language and the experiences of the Statue of Liberty by using that same source material to create an infographic. And I remember I had a student ask me, Ms. Sawyer, can I do a national symbol of Honduras? And at the time I said, oh no, I'd rather us all do the same type of infographic, all doing the same symbol, national symbol, and so that they could revisit the language and have practice understanding and speaking the same similar kinds of language. However, I realized that was a missed opportunity. It was a missed opportunity for him to connect symbolism to his home country, to be proud of his work, to share his culture and country with us. And I've since thought about that from time to time. And so even though I didn't practice cultural responsiveness at the moment, it serves as a reminder to me that to listen to my students. First off, if you're ever in doubt, ask your students, or often they'll tell us, hey, can I customize this? Can I make this personal to me? And also to just allow yourself, as you're engaging your students and entering into projects with them, to make mistakes, because if we learn from our mistakes, and as I have, and I'm sure I'll continue to make more, that means that we're growing. So for tomorrow's class, take away this. Ask your students how they would express the concept or the key term in their home language. Explore that a little bit. Allow for a few minutes. See if they can use that in a sentence. Express examples from their home country, how it would be used, so that they can explore beyond. Engaging in their linguistic identity is engaging in their cultural identity. And engaging in examples is engaging in their brain, their experiences, which also include their cultures, their families, and their places that they originate from and where they're going.